there are, in fact, very few people, sort of the equivalent of counting on one hand. I've read figures that are anywhere from 200 to 2,000 of the number of people who are working in AI in general. So it just became very apparent to me that my life would be much more impactful and more well spent if I was working on this problem in some capacity.
You're listening to the AE Alignment Podcast. Every episode, a new conversation about the ideas, research, and people shaping the future of AI alignment. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, James Bowler, Head of Research Partnerships at AE Studio. I'm joined today by my guest, Pedro Ávila, one of our research managers at AE Studio. Pedro recently joined AE after a 12-year career at Google, where he worked across multiple engineering divisions and most recently as a senior technical program and products manager. And today we are going to talk about transitioning into a career in AI alignment. Welcome to the podcast, Pedro.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So let's start with the obvious question of why, after 12 years at Google, did you decide to pivot your career and work on AI alignment?
Well, to put it shortly, just nothing seemed as important as working on this. Everything that I had been working on up to that point had been related to things that I also deeply cared about: privacy, user trust, that sort of thing. But once I started learning about what was happening in the AI world and where it was possibly going, it just didn't seem like my time on this planet could be more well spent than working on this.
Cool. Yeah, maybe you could give a bit of a background about what you were doing at Google previously or in any of your previous roles. Just give a sense of like what your kind of background was before starting at AE.
Yeah. Ever since college, I had been interested in things that mattered to the end user. And this started with the first computer ethics class I took. I remember it was a deep dive into the MP3 world, if you remember Napster and Kazaa and all of that. And I was deeply interested in how we protected users and users' rights in the computing world. From there, I did a lot of consulting work and eventually sort of got back to this idea of computer ethics when I had the opportunity to work within privacy at Google. And I started working on different ways to guarantee that the user's privacy was being respected during the development process, the software development lifecycle, and eventually transitioned from being a privacy reviewer, which is a position at Google that reviews all of the outgoing software releases to ensure that it complies with all of our privacy policies and all the upcoming privacy policies that we know are in the queue, to eventually building infrastructure at Google that documents and guarantees all of those assertions that we make publicly. When I was involved in that infrastructure process, I was approached by some people in the responsible AI division at Google that was just becoming a thing to try to find ways to integrate responsible AI reviews in that privacy review process that I was owning at the time. And the more I worked with these folks, the more apparent it became that we were not doing enough for the user to ensure that those responsible AI policies that we were signaling to the world had a controlled, guaranteed process of being included in the software. And that's when I started doing more research and got more and more involved with it. And that's how my eyes kind of opened to what was happening in the AI world, how quickly it was moving, and how little the alignment problem was being considered as part of the nature of software that was being developed.
Yeah, it sounds like the privacy problem is very overlapping with the cybersecurity problem, where we're just dealing with such non-deterministic systems that are so much harder to predict, harder to control than the kind of legacy systems. And legacy at this point is anything that's like older than 5 years. 5 years ago is now legacy, right?
Exactly.
I guess it's just like a really hard threat model to deal with from a privacy standpoint, because how can you build guarantees over what the model is going to share or the data that it has access to when it has read the entire internet? It's very hard for you to, I guess, control these things. Yeah.
That's
curious, like, what did that look like when you were working with the, on the inside at Google?
Yeah, well, around what this would have been around 2020, 2021, it was a lot more to do with the privacy assertions that Sundar at the time was making publicly. We will do this, we will not do that, that sort of thing. Very AI safety focused. I wouldn't even call it AI alignment per se. It was just talking about like how will users interact with AI systems, and what will the AI systems be permitted to do at a very broad scale. So it had a lot more to do with what weapons is it capable of building, what user queries will it respond to, not going into the depth that our research today goes into, talking about morality and ethics and like where in the model alignment even lives. So these were much broader strokes, but it became apparent to me that going deep in that area was much more not just impactful, but on a geologic and universal scale, just important to be working on. The kind of things that you want to do because you don't see other people doing it. And as I'm sure you know, the more I learned about this, the more I realized that there are, in fact, very few people, sort of the equivalent of counting on one hand, how many people are working on this problem in the world. I've read figures that are anywhere from 200 to 2,000, but either one of those is like a rounding error on a rounding error of the number of people who are working in AI in general. So it just became very apparent to me that my life would be much more impactful and much more, at the time that I have on this planet, would be more well spent if I was working on this problem in some capacity. And I understood at the time that, even though I have a bit of a research background from my time in graduate school, I've never really applied myself as an academic, but it occurred to me that the skills that I had in managing products and managing programs at Google would transfer very well into being helpful in this space. And while I probably wasn't qualified to be doing the actual research, I could probably really help operationalizing that research and making sure that it was moving forward. And so when I left Google, I did so knowing that it was going to be a full-time job to find a job in this economy. And so I gave myself a little bit of a buffer and took some online courses that we could talk about, and tried to figure out like how to explore this space and understand what skills would lead me towards the kind of impact that I would like to have.
Yeah, that's great. So I definitely would love to explore the journey from Google to AE. Maybe just to start with, you can give the TLDR on how has it been? You've been at AE for a few months now. How have you found this transition from big tech into working on AI alignment? And I could also share on my side, we come from similar backgrounds to the extent that we're both in industry and less research focused, and now we are in this more like research focused org, which I think can be intimidating to people. People often think like, oh, I need a PhD or whatever in order to like add any value here, and like I certainly don't think that's true.
I agree with that.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd just love to hear, based on the few months you've been at AE so far, how have you found it? What are the kind of like core skills that you feel you've brought to bear coming from this more like industry focused background?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, for one, it's awesome. I think I had a wonderful time at Google for the majority of the time that I was there. But going from a 150,000 person company to a 150 person company is just a huge learning curve, right? Like talk about a whiplash. But it's been, I mean, I can't even think of anything that is not positive about it. The time at AE so far, like you said, it's only been a few months, but it's felt like my first few months at Google, if I'm honest. Like I had this experience when I was working at Google when I started teaching at Columbia, where I was so looking forward to this like new environment, right? I had already been to Google a few years, and I thought, wow, I'm going to be working at like an Ivy League university, and I'll probably be surrounded by the same kind of like intellectual smartness. Just the competence of people around me was always something that was notable, and it was interesting to see how the level of intelligence of the people you work with doesn't necessarily translate from one environment to another. Like at Google, I always joke that like they could probably have paid me a lot less because what really mattered to me was the people I worked with, and I got so much out of that because it's not how intelligent everybody was. It was just how competent they were. That made my life so much easier. And that didn't translate in the academic world. Like when I moved over to Columbia, it wasn't quite the same level of impact. Like obviously the people there were very, very intelligent, but the culture of like doing what you said you were going to do, writing a competently written email that I could act on, right? Those things didn't flow quite as quickly in the academic world as they did at Google. And I think my transition to AE has been very similar. I'm wowed by the competence of the people I work with. And that's the kind of thing that really, really fires me up, is working with people that do what they've said they're going to do. When they say something, you have total confidence in their ability to do it. It's clear, it moves the needle, and you're able to accomplish things in a very short period of time. That is not different from my time at Google. The things that are different are just how quickly the organization is capable of moving. I remember in my first few weeks at AE, I had this idea for some system I wanted to automate, and I had all of these compunctions to reach out to my manager and schedule like a meeting to discuss the idea. And it very quickly became apparent that the onus was not on make everyone aware of what you were doing and then figure out how you're going to do it. It's like, no, do it first. If you step on some people's toes, or if it turns out that like you missed a systemic use case that doesn't really work at AE, that's not going to be a problem. Like we'll just, you'll scrap it and start over again. And so this idea of like asking for permission and really getting all the eyes to understand what direction we're all moving in together, doesn't apply because you're not moving this behemoth through a process. You're just introducing a new thing that maybe it will work and maybe it won't. And that was very refreshing. And it's the kind of thing that also makes you, when you close your laptop at the end of the day, you're really looking forward to tomorrow to pick up the pieces here because you're excited about what you're working on. It's moving fast enough that you can retain that excitement.
All right, I think that was a great answer. Yeah, I think maybe the crux of what I heard from you is when you're just an effective operator within industry or within any environment, that just brings tremendous value to whatever it is you're doing. And so even if, you don't have a PhD, you're not like, the leading expert on a particular topic, just being able to provide that level of organizational capability massively accelerates the folks around you. Like if I think about both my experience now and in the past, and I'm not like the expert in any one individual thing, but being able to connect people, whether that's like folks in academia with our team to accelerate the research of those like really good academics, that's one thing. Whether it's just being able to start new initiatives without, like you say, without drowning in the bureaucracy that often happens in, large government entities or nonprofits. All of this stuff is really valuable to the point that if you aren't doing these things, then it's really hard to make progress on the research itself. And we see this a lot when we're working with folks in government or working with nonprofits who increasingly come to us as both the kind of technical experts, but also the team that can actually make things happen and move quickly and really accelerate other folks that we're working with. Like a core part of our output is, not claiming that all the best AI alignment researchers work at AE. I think like a bunch of the best AI alignment researchers work at AE, but also some of the best alignment researchers outside of AE can really be accelerated by our team, both from a technical standpoint as well as an organizational standpoint. And so that would be my maybe call to action for folks who are sat there in industry, really capable operators, maybe don't think that they have the technical chops, whatever, for working on AI alignment. I would question that, and I'd be like, I think what we are really looking for, and we're hiring very actively, is folks who are, smart, capable, and able to operate in fast moving environments and learn quickly. You don't have to come in day one, I think, having all of the understanding pre-baked. Yeah, that would be
100%. Yeah. I fully agree with that. Like the work that I've been able to not just jump into, but really be successful at AE in the very first few months had very little to do with my understanding of the research and much more about my ability to understand the processes that drove people's work, my ability to understand the tools that they use. None of that is specific to alignment research. And, it's been helpful that I know enough about AI alignment research and what's happening in the industry to be able to synthesize some of what's been being discussed around me. But that is much more to do with my enjoyment and what drives me to do the work than it does from my ability to do the work. So yeah, being impactful in this industry is certainly helped by the whatever understanding you have of the work being done around you. But for a research manager, it is much more important for you to just be the kind of person who can understand what's happening around you, see what needs to be done, and then go do it.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. So we'd love to backtrack now and talk a bit more about the journey that took you from Google to AE. So you said you took some courses. I think this is Blue Dot courses, maybe some other. That's right. Yeah, I would love to know what are all the steps that you took. Even like what other organizations were you kind of exploring or interested in working?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't remember exactly how I came across 80,000 hours, but they were the inroad to all of this. 80,000 hours. It was actually, I think it was an organization I had donated to in the past when I was exploring like different ways to be impactful in the AI safety world. And when I took a closer look at their website and so just had a lot of resources about like how to transition your career, what career types there are within AI safety, right? Like, you talk about mechanistic interpretability research, talk about AI policy, AI governance, even AI communications. I think there's a lot of work to be done communicating the work that is happening within the AI alignment space. So 80,000 hours was a huge resource for me. And I think that the most valuable thing they offered that really got me started was their one-on-one consultation. This was something you apply for and you're selected for. But I can't remember if it was half an hour or an hour of time with one of the specialists, like the career transfer specialists at 80,000 hours. And it was very helpful, enlightening conversation. And it seemed at first like it wasn't really going to take me anywhere. It was just a pleasant conversation that gave me some insider knowledge. But a few weeks later, I actually got an email from 80,000 hours saying, there's this company, AE Studio, and we'd like to connect you to them because we think that it's a good match. And I spoke with some of the PMs at AE and did some interviews. It didn't go anywhere at first, but it sort of woke me up to the fact that I didn't have to be looking at behemoths, right? Like at the time, I was looking at Netflix. I was looking at all the big FANG companies that I knew because, hey, I've been at Google for 12 years. I was more or less institutionalized at that point, barely knew what was happening outside the world. But it woke me up to AE, and I really loved the business model, right? Like that just caught my attention so fast. The idea that AE is a consultancy that does applied AI consultation, software engineering, and just solving problems. And then all of that revenue is what drives the research lab. And that seemed to me like such a principled way of making an impact in the world, using the levers of business to drive the levers of science. Wonderful model. And it clicked with me. And I said, yeah, this is the place. I got to stick with this. I've got to find something that works here. And that drove me to continue looking elsewhere. I was looking at a few other research labs, like the Secure AI project was one that I was working very close with. I loved the work that they were doing. I was looking at Meter. I was looking at FAR AI, Control AI. And eventually I found this opening for a research manager at AE that I don't think I even applied for it. I think I emailed one of the PMs I had interviewed with and just said, like, I'm back. Like, this is it. I'm going to go for this. And they were like, yeah, go for it. Do it. And it's one of those situations that I wasn't thinking about this at the time, where the company is so small that I would definitely run into these guys again once I was within the company. And it was nice last week when I was in LA and I got to not just, say hello to the same people, but like, give them a hug, because it's not this big corporate environment. Like everybody just knows each other. It's wonderful.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the interesting thing about AE that I found is when you get yourself in the headspace of, oh, I want to do something more impactful, I want to work on this like big problem, I'm going to leave my nice, cushy job or whatever. And you think of it, or at least how I thought of it at the time, is a trade-off. It's like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice my career or whatever, or maybe I'm going to sacrifice on, income, or I'm going to, I'm going to lose somewhere and I'm going to gain in terms of feeling good about the work that I do. And
That's a very important aspect of it. Yeah.
right. And then the reality is, no, actually, I'm not losing. Because our model is inherently, we're generating real value and revenue for our clients as well as doing the impactful research. So it's like, no, actually, many people who maybe think they're in this situation where they're, willing to make that trade-off. Actually, it's not a trade-off in many cases. You can actually win across the board. You can have a great work life. You can have really great impact with your work. Competitive compensation.
I 100% agree with this. That's a really good point. There was a lot of inertia to leaving Google, right? Like for one, I hadn't interviewed in 10 years, barely understood what the world was like outside of Google anymore. And when I came across AE, well, before I came across AE, yeah, with all the places that I was excited to make an impact in, they were nonprofits, they were research labs, they were just not offering the same kind of salary necessarily that Google was. But there were plenty of places that were, and AE was certainly one of them. And once I landed at AE, there were some little things that was a little bit of a wake-up call for me, like, well, just to give you an example, like I hadn't paid for my own phone in 12 years, right? Like, and I remember speaking with my brother about like, well, should I take this offer? Like, it's a really good offer, really like the company, but there are some things that's like, but I think I have to pay for my own phone. What's that about? And he was like, dude, what are you talking about? Wake up, like live in the real world. That's a normal thing, So I think that's an example of the kind of things that you sacrifice, right? But it's not really sacrificing; it's coming back to the real world.
Yeah, that sounds like a Google specific problem. I don't know. Maybe there's some other big tech problems like this, but yeah, I've always personally owned my own phone.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember when I was at Google for I think only 5 or 6 years. I didn't go to Google right out of college, right? Like I had a whole career, and then I went to grad school, and then I came to Google. And there were some people that I met at Google who left undergrad and came directly to that company. There were some people who even lived like they never paid for their own Wi-Fi in their apartment because they lived across the street from the Google building, and they just like used the Google Wi-Fi. Then streets in New York are small enough to carry that signal there. But I remember thinking like, holy moly, man, like these are kids, I'll call them kids really, whose whole social life even exists at work. Especially because Google provides the meals, 3 meals a day and all that. Like there are some people who don't leave the building until they're going home to go to sleep. And point of order, I have heard of people who are sleeping at the office. That didn't seem like a healthy thing for me, right? Like there are there are things in that tech world that don't carry over to the real world. And I think, that paying for your own phone is an example of that, where you get indoctrinated into this way of thinking that like either you're entitled to it or you're just comfortable with it, and all of your friends live at work. You end up marrying a coworker possibly, and there's a separation there that is healthy, I think, for you to, sure, like your coworkers, enjoy time outside of work with them even, but if that's your whole life, you are in danger of one day losing all of that in the snap of a finger. And that was a nice wake up call. And if all I have to do is pay for my own phone to learn that, I think that's a cheap way to do it.
Yeah, I think this idea of the wake up call, especially in folks, who are working at the frontier AI companies, is also maybe like part of the reason we exist as well, right? Where I think some of the risks associated with the technology, and the reason why we're so interested in solving AI alignment, is because the way that the technology is being pursued right now, these things are not being taken sufficiently seriously. The idea that we're going to develop super intelligence, where our ability to understand its goals or be able to have control over it are like second-class citizens, is not something that I think is going to end well, and I think is perpetuated to some extent by this kind of groupthink that happens inside the frontier AI companies. So it definitely is freeing to be able to work in this space and care about the problems that actually matter, rather than having to be constantly bashed by some corporate narrative saying that, whatever, we're just going to continue to build capabilities and maybe the AI will solve alignment itself, or something like that.
Right.
Which doesn't sound very compelling to me. Great. Yeah. So we would love to go back to what are some of the, I think you mentioned you took some classes, and then you were like exploring different organizations. Are there any other things that you'd like to mention that helped you to kind of make the transition to working on alignment?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I skipped over the part where once I had been contacted by 80,000 hours, it wasn't like, well, I found AE and then I found them again and that was it. Like there was a period of a few months in between where I became very aware of the things I would still want to learn before diving into the space. And at the time, I think I was thinking that I can't just jump into a research space without understanding more about the alignment problem and the current research going on there. I'll stick to what I said before, that you can be impactful in this industry without being familiar with all of the research. But I personally I wanted to know. And so 80,000 hours and Blue Dot are very close. And so Blue Dot was one of just the first areas that I found that were teaching the kinds of courses and in the formats that I learned best from. So I did do some like LinkedIn courses, and there were some through Coursera, and I think Google.org also had some interesting courses that I took. But the ones that I think made the biggest impact for me were the Blue Dot Impact courses. And it's interesting because they've been developing their courses almost like in real time, like building the airplane while it's flying. So I think the first course I took from them was called AI Alignment and Safety, and that course didn't even exist as an offering anymore by the time I finished taking the course. But it was such an interesting way to dive into the space with people who, the facilitators of the course were very knowledgeable. They had clearly read a lot of these papers themselves. I think some of them had even taken part in some of the papers that we were studying. And it was a great way to dive into the space without feeling like you were missing all the prerequisites for it, because it was very broad, and then it went deep in very specific places. But you could always sort of pull back to a place where you were more comfortable. It was a lot of discussion, a lot of networking. That led me to other courses that Blue Dot was offering, like courses that do more with governance than with mechanistic interpretability research. But then there were also more technical courses that eventually I dove into. Some of this led me to just the networking with people tells you more about the industry, I think, than the actual courses. Sometimes you join different groups that are talking about conferences that are happening. I wound up going to Paris to attend the ICI conference that was organized there by Stuart Russell. I was also reading a lot of books at the time. All of the major works, Yudkowsky's book about if someone builds this, everyone dies, Stuart Russell's books, Max Tegmark's books, and you just consuming all of this information, trying to get a bigger picture of the research space, so that when I would read an abstract for a paper or go deep into another one, I had a little bit of background, not enough to understand even 40 or 60% of each paper I read, but enough to grok these things over time. And I think that's what I would say to people who are thinking about this and maybe a little bit intimidated is, if you think you understand AI safety, you're wrong. There's so much to grok here. any one person will understand one component of it, but the bigger picture is too big for anyone to do to understand fully. So don't be turned off when you read a paper and you're like, I understood 60% of that. Like 60% is a pretty good amount for someone who's just getting started. And that will build up over time. And I think that in the first even few weeks, but certainly over the first few months at AE, my understanding of what we're doing and how we're doing it has grown exponentially just by osmosis, right? Like you're just around these terms, you're around these concepts and the tests that we're running to validate or invalidate them. These things come to you over time. It's not like if you read these 5 papers, you'll understand what we're doing. Like that, it's not deterministic like that. So
Totally.
yeah, I think that the path for understanding the space has much more to do with spending time in it and being uncomfortable with your discomfort so that you can over time grok it more sufficiently.
Yeah. And maybe now is a good time to advertise that we are partnering with the AI Alignment Foundation and launching our own fellows program. And we're going to do a bunch of hackathons actually in a few different cities as part of this effort to bring more people into the AI alignment community. And so in particular, we're interested in taking more folks like Pedro and others who've come to AE from industry and help that transition process into working more directly on alignment. So our particular theory of change revolves around taking all the talented ML engineers out there, talented data scientists who have worked in industry in something that might be completely different from AI alignment. It may not even be on kind of like frontier AI, LLM architectures, this kind of thing, and bringing those people to bear on what we see as the most important problem, which is solving the alignment problem, which we've talked about in previous podcasts. And so while other folks who operate in this space often have like a heavier emphasis on a more like academic research background, at AE, we certainly index much more heavily on engineering experience, because even if you're not the one driving the research agenda, what we increasingly see, actually not just within alignment, just research in general, is to do research, you need to do a certain amount of engineering work. That might be building tools, it might be organizing your infrastructure, training models, any number of things that folks from more academic backgrounds typically don't have the experience building these things. Pedro, you've been at Google. You understand better than most of us how to kind of build large engineering programs at huge scale. And this is just something that you're not going to learn by doing research in academia, but is nonetheless increasingly crucial to doing relevant AI alignment research. And a particular example of that would be, in order to do something relevant, you have to now do things at scale. It's not sufficient to just do these kind of toy training. Demonstrations on really small models. It's like, no, you need to demonstrate that the behavior that you're trying to elicit actually scales with model size. And as soon as you're talking about training a model that has billions of parameters, then you're talking about managing, orchestrating dozens or maybe hundreds of GPUs. If you're doing a new technique, maybe you have to manage something about like gradient updates that you don't normally need to do if you're just running it on a single piece of hardware. These are like hard engineering problems that folks in academia are not trained for, and even frontier AI systems right now are not able to just solve for you. You can't just click your fingers and ask Claude Code to do, to figure these things out. These are still things right now that you need a human in the loop for. So yeah, I just want to give a plug to our fellows program. Curious, Pedro, when you were exploring your pivot, if you looked at any of the existing programs, or maybe you're like, oh, if only a fellowship had been around like a year ago. Yeah.
No, I looked at several, and one of the programs I was about to start at Blue Dot actually was something similar to this fellows program. It was, I think they call it their technical AI safety project, which is like a 6-week intensive, or at least it was at the time. Like I said, they change these things a lot. It was like a 6-week intensive where you had a project idea and you would bring it to them and they would pair you off with like an engineering minded expert who would help you to implement it and you bring it from idea to fruition. And I got hired at AE before I started that course, so I wound up not doing it. But there were several others that would take place around the world, and there some of them are in the country you're in. Some of them you might want to invest in flying out to wherever the other experts are, so that you can partner with them. I think that the idea of doing is really what drives the ability to grow in this space. I networked with a lot of people at Blue Dot who had all these ideas, but they just felt stuck because they weren't technical enough or they didn't have the experience to just start working on something. And they were constantly talking about how they felt they felt that inertia. They just couldn't move forward with it. So they just kept reading papers and reading papers and reading papers. And because of that, they didn't feel like they were making any impact. And that became very apparent to me when I started just working with Claude to, vibe code something. And then you realize how different today's world is to just get started with an idea and get it off the ground. And, it's not necessarily good. It's not necessarily even well implemented, better and better each day, of course. But even a few months ago, it was already a different kind of environment. But the point was that like once you started doing something, whether it's replicating someone else's paper or testing out an idea of yours, you see the spark. You see the ability to say there's a thing there that a dial I can move and see different results. And it doesn't mean I've discovered anything. It doesn't mean that I've contributed anything, but it means that I understand how others are contributing, and that can drive the ability to continue learning in this space. I think if you have the ability to get past that initial inertia to just do a thing, even if it's not a large thing, that's the kind of person who I think will grow very quickly in these spaces and flourish in a fellows program, for example.
Great. No, thanks for sharing that. So I'm curious. You talked a bit about your journey and the experience that you had. I'm curious if you were to speak to your colleagues at Google. Maybe you do, or other like big tech companies or big organizations that are likely to harbor a lot of the ML engineers that we are interested in hiring. What would you say to these people who are maybe already flirting with the ideas? It's kind of hard to fully escape, I think, notions of reward hacking or we don't fully understand what we're building, or these kinds of things are creeping into the zeitgeist increasingly. So yeah, what would you say to these folks to move the needle and kind of encourage them to abandon their meaningless corporate jobs and do something useful for the world?
Well, I mean, I'm very tempted to say like, get out. Uh, it's possible. Like it's actually better out here. But these things are very like, dependent on the person. I know someone who, just had a kid. And so like that comfort level at Google is super important in those first few months or years of raising a family. And everyone's different, of course. But I know that even this friend of mine is like, yeah, like as soon as I'm back from paternity leave, like maybe that's a direction I'll be looking at especially for the engineers. Gosh, there's so much more you can do when you're not bound by the constraints of this behemoth that is really having you focus on the next performance review. Yeah, the encouragement to get out of that is, I make a joke out of it, but seriously, like there's a freedom and a lightness that came over my life when I realized that I wasn't just focused on the next performance review. I was just focusing on like, what impact am I going to make today and this week and maybe next week? That's 20 years from now, especially the AE approach, right? Like we take a very week to week approach to our vectoring of experiments. It's not like, sure, we have the eye on the vision of what the overall project is about, but it's really thinking about what is the cheapest, fastest, quickest way that I can prove or disprove a thing so that I can make sure that I'm still on the right path. If I'm planning this out as like a 4-week sprint, man, like that's a lot of investment for something to not really materialize at the end of it. And I've already in the first few months of AE taken this mindset and applied it to other projects, the personal projects that I have in my life where I'm, working with parents in the community to reduce childhood smartphone usage, for example. It's really like, how can we fail really quickly in the next 2 weeks to say, okay, that's where we'll shift course. Or if we don't fail, like, okay, then we'll stay the course. But that approach to failing quickly and designing the experiment so that it's quick is so liberating. And again, it all comes from not really being focused on that. How am I demonstrating value to the company through my performance reviews over the next, 6 months? Like, Jesus, who cares? Let's just do good work. Again, that doesn't scale. Obviously, like 150,000 person company is different, but that's why I like not being in a 150,000 person company anymore. So yeah, to the people who are in these large companies like Google, like, Apple or Facebook or, other institutions like that, there is a life outside of that. And it's not uncomfortable. It's not, filled with the risk that you might imagine. It's actually quite liberating, and I just feel more lighthearted being out of it.
And increasingly, as more and more tools come out, if you're in these big corporate environments, I remember when I was working in quant finance, and there was a lag between Claude Code being launched and us being able to use it internally. And, if you're at one AI company, you probably can't use a competitor's tools. At AE, we can use anything. Something is released and everyone can go and try it. And, increasingly as models are getting better and better over shorter and shorter time horizons, that really allows you to be more and more productive. Like the impact of not being able to take advantage of the latest tool when it becomes available is it's a much bigger cost that you pay now compared to 3 years ago when things were moving so slowly. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I was speaking to some of the AE engineers last week about the Fable release and how they were using it, and it was so interesting to hear how quickly we had adopted Fable 5. Like, it was a matter of days, and it wasn't just like one person's trying it out and then it's sort of spreading through the zeitgeist of the company. It was like, no, it launched, and the next day everybody was using Fable 5, but we were already thinking like, hang on, this might not be available next week. We've already become dependent on it. How are we going to transition back to something else? And those conversations weren't happening at like, the CEO level to sort of, then trickle down to the company culture. It was the culture. It's what the people were discussing amongst each other. And this is possible, again, because we're a 150-person company. I think that in a place like Google, those conversations happen, but it has to go up and then down again. So like as organic as you might think you are because your team is small, you're not the whole company is not weighing in on it, and you're not benefiting from all of these different perspectives simultaneously. You're in your own little echo chamber, not unlike society, right? Like the bigger the company, the less freedom of movement you're going to have, obviously. And like you said, tooling is a big part of that. And when you don't have the capability of using whatever tool is best for the job that you're doing, you are necessarily constrained by that.
No, 100%. Great. Yeah. Anything else that you would say as kind of helpful advice or resources you'd recommend to people who are flirting with the idea of working in AI alignment and maybe need a little more help or just need the right push? Yeah. Anything else that you haven't mentioned so far?
I think the biggest thing I would aim people at is not like what books to read or what papers to go through or try to understand. There's a lot of seminal works that are worth reading, but the really big thing is to just go for it. Like, the reality of the labor market today is not what it was even a year ago, right? Like when I was applying at Google over a decade ago, I think I may have applied to like 30 or 40 positions out of grad school. And I remember it felt like a lot. It's like, holy moly, like doing all these applications takes time. And, it feels even like a little embarrassing to be, applying 30 times. Like I kind of figured that I'd be applying, maybe to 5 different places and then choosing from that. And today's world is like 10x that. Like, no joke. If I applied to 400 positions between my time leaving Google and landing a job, that's not enough. Like, I'm sure it was more than 400 applications. And that's because everyone is using AI to apply. Everyone's using AI to sift through the applications. So those are just the numbers today. And people shouldn't be discouraged by that. Like there is a new kind of friction, but there's also a new kind of liberation, right? Like there are ways to use AI helpfully to sift through your own ideas, to brainstorm new ones, to find different ways of talking about yourself to other people. So don't be discouraged by your lack of specific experience in a specific area. The skills that you have that have made you successful elsewhere can make you successful within the alignment space as well. You don't have to be a researcher. You don't even have to be technical. What you have to be able to do is care about the work, want to push the work forward, and have the skills to organize and push things through. Because at the end of the day, we're just people doing work, right? Like if you step back, I love to see the people who are working in the office and at AE in LA. Like we even see our executive assistants in the room with us talking about the research. Like they care about this, and that's a big part of moving the needle too. Everyone has a part to play in this. So if you care about this space, come look. Like your people are here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Pedro. If you want to learn more about the work that we do at AE, you should go to ae.studio/alignment. And as we've said multiple times on this episode, we are hiring. So check out the open roles on our website. We're trying to hire several ML engineers to support our alignment research and consulting work. We have new roles going up there all the time. And you can also contact us at alignment@ae.studio. I promise that those emails are read if they're not sent from an AI bot. If you come and work with us, then you'll be working on some of the most promising approaches to solving AI alignment, which otherwise wouldn't be pursued, which I think is incredibly exciting and important. Thanks so much for listening. That's it for this episode of the AE Alignment Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe wherever you listen and share it with a friend. You can learn more about our work at ae.studio. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.